Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Catherine Dolan, the Chief Public Information Officer for the Indiana Supreme Court. And I have joining us today Judge Bruce Parent of Lake County, along with two attorneys who practice in Lake County up in the region. We have Christopher Erickson and Eric Neff. Thank you both so much for joining us. Gentlemen, court operations are resuming past emergency operations, and you have the distinction of being a part of, if not the first, at least one of the first jury trials that took place on July 1st, as courts all across the state are moving past emergency operations. And so we will not get into the merits of the case, but rather logistics and operations in an effort to help trial courts, attorneys across the state learn from your experience. All in all, Judge Parent, it sounds like it went smooth. Can you describe overall what the jurors came to, what the jurors expressed once the proceeding had concluded?
Yeah, we were a little surprised, myself and the lawyers. I think there was no reluctance whatsoever. And you know, I think one of the jurors best said it was, "Hey, we're out in it anyway with our jobs. We figured you'd take better care of us than my boss does." And they weren't fazed being there one bit, which was a little bit surprising.
And Judge, I know you and both of the lawyers do consider community safety of paramount, and so paramount importance. And so you did take action in order to protect the jurors along with the attorneys in the case. Can you start by telling us a little bit about the specific action items you took to ensure community safety?
Yes, well, what we did is we spread them all out for voir dire. We went into a big, almost like a small lecture pit so that we could socially distance them. Thankfully, our commissioners here in Lake County require masks to come in the building, so we didn't have to fight that fight. Everybody was wearing a mask. We removed part of our audience area of the courtroom and put 7 socially distanced chairs, not on wheels, but like on hard casters, and then we treated the courtroom like the jury room. So instead of the jury coming and going, they stayed, we went. So when we had like a minor thing that we had to talk about, we'd approach the bench. But if it was something significant, we went and found another courtroom here in the courthouse so that we could hold it on the record there. And so,
you just let the jurors be, so to speak. Yeah. You didn't try moving people. Let's talk to the attorneys for a moment. Mr. Erickson and Mr. Neff, I'd like to hear your impressions. Staying 6 feet apart in court, wearing masks. Can you describe, both of you, what you encountered?
I think I'll go first here. I had initial concerns about presentation of the case. You know, how would that affect it? You know, would I be thrown off wearing a mask during voir dire or during questioning? Surprisingly, it did not seem to bother me. And I think part of that was because everyone was wearing a mask. We were all in this together. And there were safety measures laid out, so I felt comfortable up front. I mean, as Judge Parent stated, we had social distancing. We inverted the courtroom. We also had sanitizer everywhere we went. So anytime we touched a paper or the podium, you know, we had the sanitizer ready to go. So I guess my overall impression was I was surprised. I didn't have any concerns. It felt comfortable. And then afterwards, the fact that all the jurors showed up for their summons and they were comfortable, I feel good moving forward to do this in the future.
Sir, what do you think?
Well, my wife's a nurse, so I'm used to wearing a mask. I can't leave the house without one. Plus, we have plenty of sanitizer and that sort of thing. What I found amazing, though, I mean, I anticipated jury selection being a problem. And it wasn't at all. I mean, there were 33, I think, summoned, 31 showed up. Out of those 31, there were 3 or 4 that indicated they had other health issues or work was going to interfere, and we let them go. But the rest of them were willing to participate. And I was actually amazed at the quality of the jurors that we got there. I mean, in our particular case, I found it unusual. And I think they really, maybe for other reasons, wanted to be on the jury. I mean, I think they wanted to participate again in quote unquote normal life. And I found that refreshing, and I found that actually a very good thing for this country.
Well, we certainly do thank the jurors for their civic duty and appreciate having such a civic-minded community that you were able to attract such a great jury pool of citizens who wanted to take part. When it comes to some of the logistics, you've talked about jury selection, you've talked about some of the sidebar conversations that you need to have. You know, sometimes the devil's in the details in terms of what about juror meals, temperature checks, some of those things, evidence. Some of the courts are talking about how are we going to enter things into evidence and have papers passed around? No one wants to touch everything. Can you get into some of those logistics?
Yes. Fortunately, we got lucky in that these two worked really hard. We talked about it ahead of time and that evidence might be an issue. And so these two got together ahead of time and they came up with one agreed book. So each juror had their own book of evidence agreed. That's not always possible, but these two were able to do that. My trial that just finished yesterday, which is different than this one, there were, again, the lawyers, I took them ahead of time and said, hey, evidence is going to be an issue. Because again, we got to go find a courtroom somewhere to, if we have to argue, and they narrowed it down quite a bit. And so it made it a lot easier. A heavy evidence case, at least for the way we're doing it here, is going to be difficult. So I have a trial in 2 weeks and I'm going to take the lawyers in ahead of time, a week ahead of time. And we're going to try to work through many of the evidentiary issues up front. For the logistics reason you're talking about, Catherine.
Attorneys, you know, thank you so much for being a part of this and describing what you encountered. Do you have any advice for your fellow members of the bar across the state who maybe have not yet encountered going into a courtroom, working with juries? Any advice that you'd like to share on things that maybe your fellow lawyers can do across the state or should know about, or advice for courts who have not yet resumed past normal operations?
You want to start, Mr. Neff?
Well, the only thing that I would say is, you know, COVID's a real thing. It's not made up or anything like that. And I think it's important that our courts continue to function. We can't keep postponing things and creating these backlogs. It'll be a disaster. So I think we got to get past that. I also think the lawyers need to remind themselves, and it's difficult for, you know, people my generation in particular, the jurors are there under these COVID restrictions and fears. So, you know, get to the point, if you can sit down like Chris and I did and agree on as many exhibits as possible. I'm not saying you have to agree to everything, but as possible, that eliminates the time spent going out of the courtroom, because the jurors need to be protected and feel safe and secure in what they're doing. And I think as long as lawyers recognize that and not belabor points and go on for ad nauseum on things that might be important to them, but not so much important to the jury, it would help. And I think it would be a very good thing overall, but I also think it will streamline the process and make everybody feel more secure.
I agree with everything he said. I mean, I think it just boils down to being prepared. You know, the hardest part about a jury trial is not the trial itself, it's the preparation beforehand. And I think during these times, you know, we're going to have to take the confrontational part out of it beforehand and actually come together, you know, and prepare outside of the jury's presence, outside of the judge's presence, and recognize that those are going to be issues just prior to a trial. So we might as well address them the week before. And I'm going to try that. I got a jury trial coming up in 2 weeks. So next week, I'm going to drive to South Bend and meet with the lawyer and say, give me all your evidence and I want to I'll go through everything and tell you whether I agree or disagree. And if we have disagreements, then we're going to need to, boil it down to what those disagreements are and present it to the judge beforehand outside of the jury. But I'm optimistic about this, and mainly because, like he said, the jurors wanted to be there. And it just shows, that our system, despite these times, is having some sense of normalcy and can work. So
something certainly we can all be proud of to be a part of and make it work as best as we can. Judge Parent, in terms of the work ahead of time, I think that goes for the court as well. You created a jury trial checklist that you're happy to share with your colleagues across the state, and 19 items. Can you just mention a few of them, of the things that you would want folks to know most important on your checklist?
Yes, I think probably the most important thing to me is that you make them feel comfortable, the jurors. So half of it is keeping them safe. The other half of it is letting them know that you're keeping them safe. And so I kind of overdo it a little bit. We have social distancing signs everywhere. Yesterday we tried a new wrinkle. We had a little squirt bottle of hand sanitizer on each of their chairs when they got here on Monday, I guess. I noticed afterwards, because I'm the guy that filled the bottles up, they didn't use it, but they all commented after the fact that they were happy to have it. And so I almost want to say there's a marketing aspect to this, in that we are keeping them safe, but we're letting them know the great distance that we're going to keep them safe. The social distancing, the masks, as Eric said, this is a real thing. And so what we, for example, a lawyer can take his mask down, but only from the podium, because the size of this courtroom can accommodate that. A witness can take the mask down, but only from the witness stand. Before a lawyer takes the podium, before a witness takes the witness stand, it's sanitized in the morning, but before you touch it each time, I remind them, hey, take a squirt of hand sanitizer every time. And, so we're kind of, well, not kind of, we're over emphasizing everything. The error that I made in this first case is, while we had the temporal scanner, one person thought the other was doing it, and it didn't get done. So I promised them, I took responsibility. I said, this is nobody's fault but mine. It won't happen again. Well, interestingly, yesterday, after our second trial, the thing that they would like more of is more temporal scans. Who knew?
Right.
The only reason I did the temporal scans in the first place was to try to create a level of comfort. And that is the thing they've locked onto. Every one of the jurors yesterday were saying, yeah, I wish that instead of just once in the morning each day, after breaks, you would consider that. Okay, that's easy. Just something that I wouldn't have thought would be that important to them turned out to be, I think, the most important thing to them.
And what we may find out is that we learn from each one of these trials, and every time folks are entering our courthouses across the state, we learn something new, a way that we can help keep our community safe, including the lawyers, the litigants, the judges. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences in Lake County with us, so that we can share them with the bench and the bar all across the state. We certainly appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.